As we reported, Vice President Pence was in Colombia today to press the case against Nicolas Maduro, the man in charge of Colombia's starving neighbor to the east. Venezuela, confrontations on the border between the two countries erupted this past weekend as what was a political fight over humanitarian aid became violent. At least 3 people were killed and hundreds were wounded. With support from the Pulitzer Center, special correspondent Nadja Drost and videographer Bruno Federico have been reporting from Venezuela for us for the past 2 weeks, and they were in Ureña, that is Venezuela. On Saturday, it has become the focal point of the struggle between Maduro and Juan Guaido, the opposition National Assembly leader, which the U.S. recognizes as the rightful president of Venezuela.
The town of Ureña on the border with Colombia was the front line on Saturday in the battle between the two leaders for control of Venezuela, and the weapon of choice, humanitarian aid. For the so-called women in white pacifist demonstrators who have helped lead protests throughout the country, their mission was clear.
The plan today is to reach the heart of the military. If the military doesn't consent, if they don't see us in the reflection of their mothers, daughters, wives, of whoever suffers, we will have to use force.
They're following a plan devised by the man they now consider their president, Juan Guaido, who is trying to peel away support of President Nicolas Maduro from the military to allow aid into the country. And that meant going up against the National Guard, military, and police sent in the hundreds to guard the 3 bridges.
We have had so much taken away from us to the point that we don't have fear.
But the women in white had little chance to make it to the heavily guarded bridge. By early morning, clashes had already broken out between protesters and the National Guard.
Protesters want to make their way onto the bridge that crosses the river into Colombia, but the National Guard has been blockading all routes of access. And as they have been coming up from the bridge, protesters are meeting them. There's been an exchange of Molotov cocktails and rocks from one side and tear gas from the other. No matter what happens, protesters here today say they will find a way to break the blockade of the National Guard in order to allow humanitarian aid from Colombia to pass the border into Venezuela.
Among them was a member of the opposition-held National Assembly, Joaquin Aguilar.
The goal is to reach the bridge and allow the entrance of humanitarian aid, to break the barrier of repression that the regime of Nicolas Maduro is imposing on the Venezuelan people.
As the National Guard took to the streets and started firing at protesters with rubber bullets, many of them were rescued by mobile units of volunteer nurses and brought to the nearest safe house before being transferred to this private health clinic, opening its doors to anyone injured. By noon, volunteer doctor Solares Medina reported 40 injuries of protesters, all by rubber bullets. By the end of the day, the tally had reached 150 for that clinic alone. On the Colombian side of that bridge, one truck carrying American-donated aid inched into Venezuelan territory before it burst into flames. It was unclear how the fire started, but opposition leader Juan Guaido blamed Maduro for the fire. The searing image, the latest in what has become a violent fight over aid in the country. While the opposition blames Maduro for not allowing shipments of food and health supplies donated by the U.S., seen by Maduro's government as their #1 enemy, the government says the effort to force in aid is a form of foreign intervention and threat to sovereignty.
If a person wants to bring across goods, they have to be subject to inspection by authorities. What cannot be permitted, no country would do this, least of all the U.S., is to open a passage and open the way to whatever may be.
After Guaido declared himself president on January 23rd, the military did not rally to his side as he hoped. Aid then became a mechanism to force the military into a corner, either disobey Maduro and let the aid pass, or prevent it with the repressive tactics the government is known for. While the Venezuelan Red Cross has offered to administer whatever aid is in the country, it has refused to participate in an operation where alleged political motivations eclipse humanitarian ones.
If we participate in any activity of politicized aid, we are straying from our fundamental principles. The trust that we are acting with impartiality and independence are the principles that guarantee us access to communities.
Economist and political analyst Victor Alvarez is concerned the outbreak of violence over aid could become the pretext for more violence.
This
reaction of violent repression can plant a seed in international public opinion that in Venezuela there is a bloodbath, and so that could justify a military intervention from other countries. That is the fear.
Following the outbreak of violence on the border, Guaido was in Bogotá today with Vice President Pence and a meeting of regional nations, almost all of which have demanded Maduro leave. Jesus Faria, a member of Maduro's party, said this is the latest in a long string of U.S. provocations.
When they talk about dialogue, the only dialogue there is that President Nicolas Maduro should go. First, it's said in the United States, and then it's said here. What is the justification? We don't want to prolong the suffering of Venezuelans, but you're ready for there to be a war and a military intervention? That doesn't generate suffering?
Earlier this month, President Donald Trump announced a new series of broad sanctions against Venezuela that included tough measures against the country's all-important oil industry, asset seizures and export sanctions that could cost it $11 billion in lost oil revenue. Despite offers of aid from the U.S., the sanctions are expected to nearly obliterate the country's ability to import much-needed food and medication. Hyperinflation has meant that average Venezuelans can't afford to buy medication, driving this woman to beg for antibiotics on a Caracas roadside. Her son has spina bifida and clubfoot. Once able to get medication, now she needs any help she can get, and her needs supersede politics.
What I think is my mind is totally blocked. I don't speak, say anything, give my opinion, and I can't say I won't receive help. I always accept whatever help I get.
Maduro continues to deny a humanitarian crisis, but it is clear that Venezuelans are in dire need. Inside the public hospital in the border town of San Antonio de Táchira, the corridors and rooms are largely empty. Patients either don't come because they know the hospital can't treat them, or they cross into Colombia. Dr. William Baoque shows entire units of the hospital that have been closed.
A lot of patients arrive in a serious state and they die on the way here because even the ambulances aren't properly equipped to attend to a patient in a grave state. And then here, a lot of people die because we don't have the necessary equipment nor medical supplies to stabilize them.
Doctors here often ask patients to buy their own medical supplies.
Everything you can imagine, we need it in this country.
Facing almost no hope of prospering, much less surviving here, thousands of Venezuelans walk across the Simón Bolívar Bridge into Cúcuta, Colombia, every day.
The situation in the country is chaotic. Every day we are worse off. We work 3 times as hard to live worse. A lot of work, less money.
Edwin Perez and his family traveled over 24 hours to arrive at this vital crossing. As a bus driver, along with his wife, a nurse, they can't make ends meet. This family may make their way to Peru, but they have no idea where to go after they cross the bridge. Edwin's wife, Nuris Yegues.
We're risking practically everything. We left it all behind, our house, our work, our car, just to leave everything suddenly because you can't get what you need. It's so upsetting.
One day after their crossing, Maduro closed all land borders, leaving other families who could not flee with no options. For the PBS NewsHour, reporting with Bruno Federico, I'm Nadja Drost in Ureña, Venezuela.